thing. And I mean, obviously, there are all these arguments that proof of work proponents like to trot out that, like, oh, actually, this is incentivizing green energy production, or actually, this is using energy that would not be used for other purposes because proof of work is really good at like finding the energy that would not be useful anywhere else. But no, generally, when I look at those arguments from far away, they, yeah, always have this kind of feeling of self-serving bias. It's like, it just feels like the algorithm that these people are running is like, not like, oh, let me neutrally figure out whether or not proof of work is good or bad. It's like, oh, let me, yeah, try my best to come up with arguments for, as, like soldiers in this rhetorical war of, and, like help me justify the cause I already decided long ago I stand for. But,
You're
even when
saying it's
you,
a convenient rationale. It's like, oh, it's really convenient that
yeah,
proof of work people think that proof of
mhm,
work is green.
totally. Like it's the arguments to me feel like, imagine if someone from Philip Morris came to you and said like, hey, Philip Morris is actually an incredibly ethical company because we're contributing to the incentive to cure lung cancer, right?
Right.
Like this is basically what happened. What they're
Slow
saying.
clap.
Yeah. The and then there's all of these like methane like flaring things, and I think the challenge with them is that like you can always identify like these really specific situations where there's something really unusual about the, yeah, energy market, but like the more you zoom out and like think about this in the long game, it's like no, if 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 you consume energy, then that on it increases energy consumption, and energy consumption for the next while is going to contribute to climate issues. And there are going to be like these little discrepancies in both directions, but the little discrepancies over time, they're just going to, I think, average out. But just like the one big fact in the center of it is the thing that's going to dominate. So I think yeah, like people argue that proof of work is like good at sort of grabbing those little nooks of energy that nothing else is, because proof of work has this special property that you can do it from anywhere. But at the same time, proof of work has this property that if you want to make good use of your hardware, you have to keep it running 24/7, right? Like this concept of, oh, I'm going to only turn on my hardware at those specific times when there is spare electricity, and otherwise I'm going to shut it off. Like that's total BS, right? Just because like the proof of hardware cost is a big portion of all proof of work cost. And so if you want to be competitive, you have to use your machine, and you have to make good use of your machine until Moore's law uh, causes that machine to expire and requires you to replace it with a better machine. So it, yeah, in general, I guess, on the whole, not convinced by any of that. And I think, reducing energy consumption is good and great. And I'm immensely glad that we as an ecosystem have done it. So that's the first level of the question, right? The second level of the question is, I guess, from a kind of more selfish Ethereum ecosystem point of view, like obviously, yeah, the fact that we're not contributing to breaking the environment anymore is good for Ethereum from a narrative perspective. And I think there are lots of signs that this is actually true. Like I've personally talked to a bunch of people in corporate and government contexts and just lots of different places that are like, hey, we want to do blockchain stuff, but there's just too many people within our organization that or really don't want to be contributing to making the planet blow up. And if the merge completes, then like a lot of them have even said like, yeah, I'll be much more excited about using Ethereum. And I think a lot of that's true. I think the subconscious line of thinking that at least some of these people that I'm kind of dismissively referring to as trolls as referring to is trying to make is like, oh, this environment thing is like a centralized World Economic Forum ideology. And chances are, if you're into that stuff, then you're into centralized World Economic Forum stuff generally. And so, like, most of people who care about that are going to also care about, making sure we have global financial surveillance because they think that's the only way to prevent crime or whatever. And so, why are you even trying to go after those people? And so the people that crypto should be going after are like these sort of steely based people who understands that like that centralized World Economic Forum ideology is total crap, and like actually the environment's going to be fine, and like methane is great for the environment, and everything's going to be solar within 5 years anyway. And so that, like, I think there's this sort of implied subconscious viewpoints that really there's just two kinds of people, one or the other, and the World Economic Forum bug eaters are a lost cause, and so you might as well go after the base cool people, and the base cool people don't really care about the environment, and so you might as well use proof of work. But I feel like that viewpoint is just false. Like, I've just been, I don't know, talks to lots of people. I've been to like 53 countries now, and chatted with all kinds of people in various industries and governments, and like, I don't think it's true that like there's this binary, and I think there's plenty of people that like really do deeply believe in the freedom thing and the open source thing and the decentralized like censorship resistant global neutral platform thing, but like also do care about like not blowing up the planet at the same time. And like I feel like the Ethereum community in general is probably sort of more on average tilted toward that middle, though there's definitely people on all sides of the spectrum. So I mean, it sort of ties into the social and cultural bet that I think Ethereum is making, that some of those kind of hardcore proof of work proponents are taking the opposite side of the bet. So I'm happy with the side of the bet I've made, and I plan to keep making it. So we'll see.
By the way, for YouTube viewers, the reason David and I have a smile on our face is because we just noticed Vitalik's login name is Adam Back, which is maybe one of the CEOs of the Philip Morris's fighting for proof of work. But Vitalik, can I ask you, is it material? Like, is the difference between Ethereum switching from proof of work to proof of stake, does that have an actual material impact? I think he tweeted out a Justin Drake figure, and I'm not sure where he got this number, where he sourced it, something like a 0.2% reduction on worldwide electricity consumption, which feels very material. What kind of numbers have you seen? And are these actually material numbers, or do you think it was like much ado about nothing all along?
I mean, the 0.2% figure definitely roughly lines up with other statistics that I've seen, right? Like, we've seen statistics that, like, Ethereum mining uses about as much electricity as, I think it was either half of Singapore sometimes or Austria sometimes. And, like, those countries are about 0.1% of the world population, but they're a wealthy 0.1%. So I think if you just look at all those different estimates, like somewhere vaguely in the 0.2% range does make sense. I mean, the one argument that I have seen people make is that, like, oh, that hash power is not going away, it's just going to go to Ethereum Classic. And that's clearly true to some extent in the short term, but that just obviously can't be true in the medium or long term, right? Like, in the medium or long term, like, we've basically reduced the amount of reward that gets paid out to people who participate in like GPU style proof of work by probably a factor of 10, right? And so in the medium and long term, the amount of effort going into that style of proof of work is also going to go down by a factor of 10.
Yeah, we've certainly reduced the incentive. Therefore, it should follow that there will be less miners in the future. We were talking to Danny, Ryan, and Tim Bako yesterday on the live stream, and Danny gave out this metric that I want to run by you, where yes, we killed 0.2% of global electricity consumption, but he said that if Ether price went 10x, then it would have actually have been 2%. And I'm wondering if that's how the math checks out. And so, like, really, it's like, yes, we killed it at 0.2%. But if we believe that Ethereum is going to be the global settlement layer of the future of everything, then the future energy consumption that we eliminated is actually much more significant, and that is actually the bigger story. I'm wondering if that math checks out and what you think about that.
Yeah, I think I fully agree with that. I mean, it obviously all depends on your projections for just how big the Ethereum and crypto thing is going to get. But in the bull cases where Ethereum keeps becoming a more and more significant thing, then yeah, absolutely, it's a much bigger savings than 0.2%.
Mm-hmm. Vitalik, like we alluded to earlier, the road to proof of stake has been long and winding, with a few dead ends, a few backtracks, and then moving forward to where we ultimately got here today. But for the listeners that came in during the 2021 bull market or later in 2022, they might not know why Ethereum proof of stake took so long. So I'm wondering if you can kind of just, for the listeners that weren't here in the eras of 2017 to 2020, kind of give a recap to the journey thus far. Like, why did proof of stakes take so long, and what were the dead ends and the roads that we almost went down? What were some of those that path like?
Yeah, I mean, so the roadmap like really did change a huge amount over the last few years, right? Like the in the 2017 to the beginning of 2018, there was this whole Casper FFG concept where we would basically build the proof of stake system as a smart contract on top of the proof of work chain. And then step one would be to kind of get that running, and then step two would be to have this kind of separate sharding chain, and then we would really slowly migrate the thing. And then before 2017, the roadmap was something even more different. It's like, hey, let's start a new chain from scratch, and then basically just completely retire the existing one and demand all of the applications to actively move over. And then in the middle of 2018, Justin Drake made this post on pragmatic BLS aggregation, where he argued that the Ethereum blockchain should make really heavy use of BLS aggregation in order to support as many validators as possible and be able to be a more decentralized chain. And that, I think, ended up being a really prescient decision, ended up really simplifying the architecture and helping us a lot. But one of the consequences of that meant that we would not be able to actually build the thing as a smart contract, and instead it would make much more sense to build a new chain and then find some way to like migrate the Ethereum system over to it over time. And so work on the beacon chain started. Now, then simultaneously, there was this parallel track of working on different ways of how to transition existing Ethereum into the beacon chain, right? So in 2018 to 19, there was this concept of execution environments where it's like you can think of them as being sort of like roll-ups, except much more enshrined, and where the chain would not just provide data, it would also provide a minimal execution layer. And the idea is that the existing Ethereum system would become one of those rollups. I think back then we were also really contemplating trying to upgrade from the EVM to WebAssembly, and that's one of those things that we ended up dropping over time, right? Like, one of the unfortunate things that I think was necessary as part of the merge was that there were a lot of dreams that kind of got dropped, and the ambition did end up decreasing a bit. So the desire to improve the VM ended up kind of dropping off, and part of that was definitely just us noticing that out of all of the ETH killers, the only ones that really had significant success were the ones that just accepted the EVM, and the ones that tried to argue that, oh, the EVM is total crap and we'll replace it with something much more performant and better. Like, those, maybe with the exception of Solana, ended up kind of falling off mostly. There's obviously the question of like just how many other things we could use the merge as an opportunity to reform, and I think we did manage to reform some things, but a lot of other things did manage to like basically stay as they are. I mean, like right now, the Ethereum clients are still processing the pre-merge chain, right? And there was a desire, I think, to use the merge as a reset opportunity and allow Ethereum clients to not have to process that history. And I think that still will happen with EIP 4444, but that's something that we're going to have to wait a bit longer for. So there's just a lot of these little things on which the ambition of the project decreased a bit, but it slowly turned into a more and more realistic thing. And then, finally we settled on a design, and we even settled on a very simplified design for the merge, and then we went for it.
And the design that we finally settled on, the one that we know of today, which is now current Ethereum, do you think if we had like waited and like thought about it more and done some more research, we would have found a different design? Or do you feel like the design that we settled on is like the final logical conclusion of Ethereum proof of stake?
So there's two questions there, I think. One is, what is the better long-term form of proof of stake? And the other is, if the research team and only the research team had had 500 years to spin its wheels, could it have come up with a better way of managing the transition? So for the first question, I think the answer is like, no, we are currently very far from what a truly optimal Ethereum proof of stake would look like, right? And, recently we've been having these discussions about single slot finality, which is just a big redesign of the consensus. There's all of these designs around like Merkle trees and different ways to implement sharding and different ways to implement deposit and withdrawal logic and all of this stuff. So still a lot of improvement work to go. And I think we do still have the opportunity to keep working hard over the next few years to make that improvement actually happen. But then on the question of was the merge as it was done the best way to do the transition? I would say maybe yes, maybe no, right? So I think if I could like give myself a research time capsule back to 2014, I probably would have said, don't bother with the Casper FFG design and instead implement a simpler version of chain-based proof of stake first, and so that you can move to that in like maybe around 2018, and then like properly improve proof of stake later on a more relaxed schedule. Where like I do think that we set ourselves goals that were a little bit too high for the proof of stake that we moved to for the first round, and we even ended up not accomplishing some of those goals, right? Like there's a lot of these security issues that arose from the specific design of the Casper FFG system in the way that the LMD Ghost and Fork Choice side and the BFT consensus side like interact with each other. And that's one of the bigger things that we're going to have to resolve with the single slot finality change. So yeah, basically I think create a simpler and less powerful proof of stake and move to it earlier would have been one of the bigger changes that I would have made. But the format of the merge, I think, was excellent. Like, I still don't think that there's a better merge format that we could have come up with, and I definitely hope that other chains like Zcash and Dogecoin are probably two proof of work chains whose core dev communities I talk to a lot and I'm pretty friendly with. Like, I hope they learn from the merge and they move over to proof of stake over the next 4 years or so.
So Vitalik, if you could go back in time, it sounds like one thing you might change is you would have simplified the proof of stake kind of conception and maybe got it in the roadmap a little bit earlier, deployed it a little bit earlier. I mean, as you mentioned, we're here now, and that's fantastic. But we did have some false starts and some meanderings along the way. And I think for everybody involved, it took longer than we thought. I mean, 8 years. And proof of stake had been in the Ethereum social contract from the beginning. Yet there was also a benefit. And maybe that benefit came in the form of like proof of work distribution, right? So more ETH stake was distributed over a greater number of entities, I guess we would assume or suppose with proof of work distribution, and so that was a benefit. I mean, overall, is there anything else big that you would go back and change, or are you satisfied with how this turned out?
I mean, definitely, had we known the results of the meanderings, it would have been great if we could just skip to the result immediately, right? So the design of the proof of stake system and all of the choices of like, should it be a chain or a smart contract or something else is one side of it. The other side of it is the layer 2 scaling roadmap. Like, I think Optimism and Arbitrum could have been finished and fully trustless by now had we known from the start that rollups are the way to go. And, we had not spent as many resources kind of going down the state channels and plasma rabbit holes. Like, I think going down those rabbit holes was useful from the point of view of like inventing 10,000 ways not to make a light bulb. And I do think that state channels make a lot of sense in some specific use cases, but I definitely think that we made a false step in like at first really hoping that that would be the way that Ethereum applications would scale in general. And then with Plasma, like there was this hope that we could find some way to generalize it, but that ended up just not working. And then 2 years later, I think we ended up learning that, like, well, actually pretty much nobody wants a scaled Ethereum that's just a payment system. Everyone who's in Ethereum already wants something general purpose, and so there's no point in making even a rollup unless it's a general purpose one.
Mm-hmm. Vitalik, you know, we use this going west metaphor. We're on a journey into the frontier. There's a dark fog of war ahead of us, but some of the guests on the podcast are people that have scouted into the unknown and come back to tell us what's in the future. And so as somebody who knows the history of Ethereum very, very well, and also understands cryptography and crypto economics very, very well, can you like place us in history or on like, you know, a map or a journey of where we are going and where Ethereum is? I remember you saying something along the lines of post proof of stake Ethereum is about 55% completed. Could you talk about like where are we in Ethereum's trajectory and where are we in crypto's relevancy to the world?
Sure. So I think one way of looking at it from a trajectory of the protocol point of view is to look at the roadmap from last year and basically ask like, how much progress has been made, right? So if let me just Google this now and let's check Ethereum roadmap on Google Images, and I'm sure it'll be up there. There it is. Click.
And as you're talking, Vitalik, we'll be viewing this on YouTube so we can see. And you're referring to the merge, surge, verge, purge, splurge roadmap.
There it is. So if we want, so just looking at the 5 tracks, right? We can go through the tracks one by one. So the merge is completed now. The things in the merge section that are not completed are one is the post-merge hard fork with withdrawals, right? That's obviously the one of the next big priorities right after the merge. It's a pretty simple hard fork, and like we basically know what to do. There's a spec. I think the main debate at this point is to do it at the same time as 4844 or do it earlier and then do 4844 a bit later. But otherwise it's like we're not far from it. Distributed validators, I think, still progressing. Actually, haven't checked up on that team for a while, but I imagine they've made quite a bit of progress, though it's not quite 100% done yet.
Is that if we look at DVT from Obel? Is that what that is?
Yes, it's DVT, aka SSV.
SSV, right. Cool.
Yeah. Right. So, and then if we look in the longer term extras, single secret leader election, there's been some great work on the cryptography there. The cryptography itself has been published. Single SWOT confirmations, or what we now call single SWOT finality, that's a bigger item. And I think it's an item that has been really moved earlier in the roadmap because people just recognize the value and the importance of it much more. And I think this is one of those things that we are going to have a big public discussion with the community at some point, because there are huge benefits to single SWOT finality, but at the same time, there are some costs. So like, for example, some compromises either to the 32 ETH validator balance property or to the level of economic finality that we can expect, and just like different trade-offs of what kinds of things would have to be sacrificed if we want to be able to actually like have finality in like say 32 seconds or something like that. And then better signature aggregation is just a subset of single SWOT finality at this point. So that's the merge. Basically, the entire left half of that box is finished, and the right half of the box is still to go, which is great. The surge. So there, I think things have obviously been reshuffled a bit, right? So back then there was the whole 4488 versus 4844 stuff, and I think lately 4844 has been winning, and it's basically fully specified. It's just waiting in implementation, and so that would be, I would call 4844 the equivalent of basic sharding. Though I think one of the interesting things with dank sharding, which happened after this roadmap, is that dank sharding really moved us away from the concept of having discrete shards, like shards as individual units. Instead, we're just moving to this more amorphous concept of like there's these big data blobs, and there is a distributed procedure for verifying the data blobs, but otherwise there's just blobs, and there isn't like a hard point where one section of a blob ends and another section of a blob begins. So I would say there, I would say, the short-term called data expansion box got short-circuited a bit. The basic sharding box, that green bar is probably a bit further. And then the basic sharding and data availability sampling, like that's a really big research area. So